Our text comes from Mark chapter 10, verse 35. Mark chapter 10, verse 35. And we're focusing on the disciple of John. And like we were mentioning about imperfect disciples, one of the disciples that maybe you don't think, that he's imperfect because he's probably like doing all the right things, right? But let's look at Mark chapter 10, verse 35, and we're going to study the disciple John. Then it says, Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, let one of us sit on your right and the other on your left in your glory. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can. Jesus said to them, well, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom it had been prepared. So when the 10 heard this, they became indignant with James and John. And Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. You see, John was a peculiar person. If you just knew him based on his occupation, he was a fisherman. But not just any fisherman, he was the son of Zebedee. Now, Zebedee was a fisherman himself, but he owned this fishing business. You see, Zebedee was married to Salome, and Salome was the mother of John. John also had a brother called James. And so John and James were called as disciples of Jesus. Not only that, we see John wrote many books in the Bible, actually 5 of them. One was the Gospel of John, then 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John, and also Revelation. And so we see that all these things that, John was very, very, the details that we see in the gospel. Not only that, he was very close to Jesus. If you thought about the inner circle of Jesus, John was part of that. It was Peter, James, and John. John was very close to Jesus. And so we see here in Mark chapter 1, verse 19, we see that Zebedee and his brother, it says, he saw James when Jesus was calling out John and James. He says, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat preparing their nets. Without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. And so we see that their family had a business, and so they had money. They had some form of privilege. They had some form of, status in the community. Zebedee was not only a fisherman, he owned a business. That's why he says hired men. They had hired men that followed him. Not only that, we see that in Matthew chapter 27, verse 55, we see a host of women who followed Jesus, that supported Jesus, right? They would support him. And one of the people that supported Jesus was John's mother, Salome. And we see here in Matthew chapter 27, verse 55 and on, that says that in verse 56, it says, and the mother of the Zebedee's sons. And in Mark actually identifies who that person is. In verse 40, it is Salome. And so we see that John comes from a affluent family. John has some form of privilege. He grows up, knowing that his family owns a business. His family has ownership. They make a lot of money here. And so when we're talking about privilege, one of the things that we have to, what we're going to understand or learn about is how do we misappropriate, or how do we keep ourselves from misappropriating our privilege? How do we, with our privilege that all of us have, okay, whether, we're talking about Zebedee, Zebedee's son, right? John, for him, it was his family. It was who he is what the community knew of him. knew about his family. That was his status. And maybe that's not your status, right? Maybe it's not your family. Maybe it's, the degrees that you have, or maybe it's your hard work, or whatever you have built, whatever you have held on to that say, I am Zebedee's son, meaning that you have a name, you have a status, you have some form of privilege that gives you an in. And John had an in, even in the times when Jesus was arrested and Peter tried to go into the council to see the high priest, right? It was John who actually led him in. So John knew people. John had hookups, right? John knew the right people. He had some type of status that allowed him to go into places because of who he knew. And so one of the places that we understand is that the first point of where we have to start with not allowing our misappropriating of our privilege is restrained impulses. Somebody say restrained impulses. And in Mark chapter 10, verse 35, we see that John is very impulsive, right? He's very impulsive. He even asked Jesus, hey, listen, I want you to do something for us, right? Not just me, my brother also, right? James and John. And and Jesus even entertaining this question is another level, right? Where he says, listen, I want you to give us these positions when you get into your glory, right? On the right and the left. And Jesus, what did Jesus say? Jesus said, you don't know what you're asking. And what was the quick reply? No, we can't, right? This was very impulsive. They were not thinking about, all right, the consequences. They were not thinking about any of what they were, talking about, all right? They were very impulsive. And we see this nature that's very consistent with John. And then we see that in chapter 9 of Luke 9, verse 54, when they are in a Samaritan village and they are not welcomed in that village, all right, what does John say? Should we just bring down and send fire on them? Oh, come on, right? Really, John? And so they had this impulsive nature. John was very impulsive. He had impulsive judgments on others. And in Mark chapter 3, verse 17, even though people knew him as Zebedee's son, right, or these Zebedee's kids, right, not Bebe kids, but Zebedee's kids, okay, and Jesus gave them a name, Sons of Thunder. Why? Because he knew their personality. He knew how impulsive they were. He knew, how they were driven by the impulses. They were driven by this character that they had. And maybe that's you. Maybe people know you by your unstrained impulses. Maybe you speak before you listen. Maybe you answer folks knowing that you didn't even hear the question yet. Maybe you're quick to judge. And what happens is, we see in verse 41, the 10, after listening to the impulsive responses by John, they become indignant, right? They are angry. It says they started to resent, they started to get annoyed with John. And see, when we speak and make decisions from unrestrained impulses, we hurt others in the process. And when we continue this behavior, even the people closest to us start to resent us. They get annoyed and they get angry with us. My impulsive nature, all right, I'm confessing right now, all right, has gotten me into 3 timeshares. Okay, some of you, yes, that's me, yes, 3 timeshares. Anybody 4? Anybody 5? Anybody 5? Anybody 5? That I'm still trying to get out of. And sometimes, right, those impulsive decisions that we make, based on emotion, right, in the moment, it feels good, it sounds good, and I'm going to make a decision right away without thinking, without processing, without thinking about the results, not thinking about the future, not thinking about how it's going to affect you in the future. And we make those impulsive decisions in the moment, and that was John, son of thunder. I know people know you as son of Zebedee, but I'm going to rename you. You are a son of thunder because of your nature. Because how you make decisions, how you blurt things out without even thinking. How do we keep ourselves from misappropriating our privilege? Restrain your impulses. There are times where you want to be quick to judge. There'll be times where you want to be quick to correct. I mean, quick to use your privilege. But in this case, what we're learning is there are times where we just have to restrain ourselves. What you have to say can wait. The decision that you have to make, listen, if it's a good decision today, it will be a good decision tomorrow. A lot of times we are forced and we force ourselves to make decisions and be impulsive. And in the moment when our emotions get in the way, we make poor decisions. And those poor decisions are decisions that we have to live with for the rest of our lives. And instead of being Zebedee's kid, now he's a son of thunder.